Jermaine from the Comic Book Cast.
And this is Joel, also of the Comic Book Cast, also known as the DVD Grouch on YouTube.
And this is Spandex 101,
a brand new show where we provide you, the listener, with a comprehensive guide to comic books and superheroes.
And we're back, and this time we're going to talk continuity and comics.
Probably the hardest topic we've had to do to date. I know continuity in this day and age has changed a lot. It's kind of become a dirty word. It's kind of become the go-to reason for why people say they can't get into comics or don't want to.
Very much. Well, I don't blame them, honestly. I do not blame those people. But, here's where I'm coming at, the point from this. If you want people to, pick up the comics and understand what's going on, shouldn't it be easy?
It should be, and yet comic books offer this really rare, really amazing thing, God, that I don't think many other things can do. It's the fact that these books, some of them have been written for upwards of 75 years, and you have a chance to really grow along with these characters. But again, with anything that's been written for 75 years, to keep it from being a mess, they need to change stuff, they need to move stuff around, and in many cases, like you're saying, they need to make it easier for people.
Well, I think one of the best parts of, recently was, and for example, we'll use this just to describe it right now, is Spider-Man and what happened to him. People, as Spider-Man, it's the same old that literally has not changed in 50 years. So they finally said, fine, Peter Parker dies and Dr. Octopus is going to take over his body.
Right.
That's pretty interesting, but now, that creates what the other whole problem, which is a giant mess of continuity issues.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Now, what would you say is your biggest one continuity you can name that's happened that you're just like, God damn?
Okay, well, here's a perfect example. Hawkman. Hawkman's continuity is a mess. It is a muddled mess. He has so many different origins. Sometimes he's a pharaoh, sometimes he's a space cop, sometimes he's an archaeologist. It is like a fractal spreadsheet nightmare. It is terrible. But here's the thing, though, and this is something that I think it's something DC used to do better than anybody. They haven't done it in a while. They had a really clever writer come in and basically say, you know what? It's all continuity now, and I'm going to make all of this work. I'm going to have this really awesome, storyline about reincarnation, and I am going to make sense out of all this weirdness.
A brave soul.
A very brave soul who, tried to do that. But not everybody can do that. And sometimes you're going to have, entire weird, trippy, just ages in a character's history that they're going to get rid of. Like Batman. What about all the times Batman went to space? Or, put on a rainbow-colored suit? Again, people would rather forget all the Silver Age weirdness, but then you get a writer like Grant Morrison who comes in and goes, no, I'm bringing all this shit back. You remember that obscure villain from Robin Dies at Dawn back, in the 60s? Dr. Hurt, shit, I'm bringing him back, and I'm making him a huge part of my new ongoing arc.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, because that's the thing about continuity, too, and why I think continuity has changed. Continuity used to be there to reward people who read a lot of comics, and to reward people who read comics for a very long time. It was like, hey, you remember this thing? Guess what? We remember it, too, huh?
See, exactly what you said, and one of my other problems, big problems, is going to be a character I love, which I'll bring up again. It's Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem with continuity is the characters are never allowed to age. No. So in continuity, they will erase stuff that makes them mature.
Right. Yep.
Peter Parker has been in high school, for 25 years, and then finally he gets out of high school. And in the last 10 years, believe it or not, Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, which started in 2001, only in 2013 did we learn that only a year passed.
Yeah.
More than a decade worth of comics and only a year in comic book time passed.
Yeah, that's a sliding time scale. And what's another perfect Spider-Man example of that? The death of Gwen Stacy. She died in the 60s, and they're still treating it like it just happened.
Exactly. And, that's one of the major parts of continuity. One of the best parts, though, is, you always have these unlimited stories, but the continuity you have to, at one point, learn how to ignore it.
Exactly. The way I have always approached continuity, and again, this is just me, but I think a lot of other people do it, is there just comes a point when you got to make up the continuity for yourself. Like, there are certain things, to me, in comics that I don't care what they change, I don't care what they say, they will always be in continuity. I don't care.
So, Electric Superman.
Yeah, well,
Continuity?
obviously, Blue and Red Electric Superman are in continuity. There's no taking that away. He was always blue and electric, and I mean, that's just the way it's going to be.
Fact.
Fact,
Uh,
total
and
fact.
that's something we're going to get into next episode, folks, called The Dark Age of the 90s. But for
Yes,
now, let's keep sticking to continuity where,
that's a little preview.
yeah, here's the thing. So much is broken that at some
No.
point you have to do what DC did, which is called their crisis.
Yes.
Now, they literally did this like at an average of every 6 years.
DC has had a huge history of doing a crisis, which is basically boiling down all their multiple Earths, which is how they kept their continuity straight. They're like, okay, how does the Golden Age Flash live alongside, the Silver Age Flash? Well, there was alternate Earths. He lived in Earth too. But again, the continuity got so out of control that basically they're like, well, we're scaring off new readers. We got to boil this all down into one Earth, and that was, the first crisis.
And they continue it every time it gets muffled. But the problem is, and this is the problem I have with everything DC, that the moment they contradict something in their new continuity, they go, well, fuck it, it's another Earth.
Well, it's true in comics in general. It doesn't matter what you do to try and put a lid on continuity. The fact is, it's always going to come roaring back. You know why? Because new comic fans become old comic fans overnight. And when they hear about a cool character or a cool plot device or something interesting that happened, they're going to want to see that thing. And the thing is, fans become writers. Perfect example, Jeff Johns brought back Hal Jordan, brought back The Flash, brought back all these characters because he loved them growing up, even though they were pretty much dead, gone, and, put in the closet.
Yeah, exactly. So continuity is one of these. Here's the moral of the story. Continuity is very effed up and all over the place,
Yes.
and you have to learn to live with it.
And not only live with it, but it's something you shouldn't be afraid of. Because unfortunately, well, fortunately, but also unfortunately, usually the status quo is almost always returned.
Mm-hmm.
One way or another. Much like in television, the status quo is almost always returned. Batman will always be Batman, Superman will always be Superman. Oh, sure, there'll be weird times in between, but overall stuff goes back, especially now that we're living in an age when the movies are just starting to figure out continuity and figuring out, hey, people like this and want to see this. You would be amazed, how the comics actually bend over backwards uh, to get in line with the continuity of the movies. Like Captain America will come back to life just in time for the Captain America movie. Spider-Man will almost certainly be back in his body to coincide with the new
Of
Spider-Man
course.
movie.
And I mean, this kind of points to a major issue. It's like the Lizard was gone for so long. Oh, the Amazing Spider-Man movie's coming out. Let's bring out the Lizard.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what we have to do to get him back, but we're going to get him back now
Yeah.
just for this. And there used to be a time too when you could pick out inconsistencies and stuff like that. Marvel famously pioneered this. They would give you a no prize for noticing things like that, which was basically a fun little tongue-in-cheek. Yeah, hey, you caught us. This doesn't make full sense, but thank you for being a devoted enough fan to look it out. Here's your prize.
But
You
now
see,
that we're all comic book guys,
yeah, see, there's none of that anymore, and I think that should really come back because the no prize was such a beautiful symbol of the loving relationship that was had between comic writers and comic fans. I think we've become so cynical and so jaded now that, when someone reads a comic and they're like, hey, this thing I read in Spider-Man doesn't gel with something I read back in 1974. This is bullshit.
speaking of bullshit, Green Lantern did that recently a whole lot, and they're still doing it because DC.
Well, again, Green Lantern, you run into an interesting problem there too, and I'm sure we've mentioned this on other stuff, people who listen to us frequently. Even after DC rebooted their entire universe, well, it wasn't really a complete reboot. We take everything back to issue number one, but stuff still happens until we told you it doesn't happen. And one of the most interesting cases was Green Lantern, because that book was still selling
Yep.
very highly at the time. Basically, everything that happened, Blackest Night, Sinestro Corps War, all that happened, it just happened within the span of 5 years, even
Yeah.
though that kind of doesn't make sense.
All of it happened, but no one else recalls it besides the Lantern. So,
Yes.
my argument is always like, well, if he recalls it, why doesn't he, when Bruce is, having a hard time understanding his parents' death, why doesn't he just go, hey, remember that letter your dad gave you? Oh, what, you don't?
Oops.
Ooh,
Or
yeah.
how no one comes and says, "Hey, Hal, weren't you dead for a bit? And weren't you the Spectre for a bit?"
Yeah. Weren't
It's
you
like, no,
Parallax for a while?
nope, nope. And again, you get other interesting retcons where it's like, of course, after killing Joke, Barbara Gordon was shot in the spine by the Joker, and she ended up becoming the wheelchair-bound information broker Oracle.
Uh-huh.
Now she's back to being Batgirl again.
And not only that, it's one of those things where everybody actually hated her coming back until they
Yes,
read the first issue.
until they read the book. So not all retcons are a bad thing. Sometimes you can retcon shit for the better. Again, to bring it back to Green Lantern, there used to be a time in Green Lantern continuity in history where the ring wouldn't work on yellow. They did a whole 5-issue storyline explaining that away, and now the ring can work on yellow. And again, this is another thing that DC does, probably more than anyone else. In Marvel Comics, continuity informs the story. In DC Comics, continuity is the story. That's why you get stuff like 52, entire big long storylines just to explain how shit happened and shit changed.
Yeah.
Uh, to,
So,
to put in an example, you remember the old Ghostbusters show, right?
yes.
You remember their secretary, how, like, in between seasons, their secretary just changed?
Yes, I do.
Well, you see, if that was a DC comic, they would have an entire miniseries devoted to why did Janine change? And indeed, Ghostbusters did an episode devoted to why she changed. And that's really how comic book continuity works.
Well, there's that. I think we've confused the people enough. And if you guys can't tell, we're, 4 episodes into this now? Or maybe
Yes.
3, I don't remember. But you're probably already getting into the more hardcore stuff. So, next
We
week,
hope.
yeah. We hope we're helping you a little bit.
Yeah, we hope we helped you a little. We hope you learned a little something. Maybe. Maybe we're not sure. Maybe we just confused you more. If you take anything away from this, it's that continuity is really nothing to be afraid of, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, most people just make it up anyway.
Just pick up a comic, read a little bit on Wikipedia, and go. But make sure to avoid the 90s, and we'll explain to you why on the next episode.
Ooh, the next episode. Fun little cliffhanger.